Alito and Kavanaugh for their strength and wisdom and love of our country, which is right now very proud of those justices. When you read the dissenting opinions, there's no way that anyone can argue against them. There's no way. Foreign countries that have been ripping us off for years are ecstatic. They're so happy. And they're dancing in the streets, but they won't be dancing for long. That I can assure you. The Democrats on the court are thrilled, but they will automatically vote no. They're an automatic no, just like in Congress. They're an automatic no. They're against anything that makes America strong, healthy, and great again. They also are a, frankly, disgrace to our nation, those justices. They're an automatic no, no matter how good a case you have. It's a no. But you can't knock their loyalty. It's one thing you can do with some of our people. Others think they're being politically correct, which has happened before far too often with certain members of this court, and it's happened so often with this court. What a shame. Having to do with voting in particular, when in fact they're just being fools and lapdogs for the rhinos and the radical left Democrats, and not that this should have anything at all to do with it. They're very unpatriotic and disloyal to our Constitution. It's my opinion that the court has been swayed by foreign interests and a political movement that is far smaller than people would ever think. It's a small movement. I won by millions of votes. We won in a landslide. With all the cheating that went on, there was a lot of it, but we still won in a landslide. Too big to rig. But these people are obnoxious, ignorant, and loud. They're very loud. And I think certain justices are afraid of that. They don't want to do the right thing. They're afraid of it. This was an important case to me, more as a symbol of economic national security, and also, I would say, just for our country itself, so important, because we're doing so well as a country. We've never done so well. The good news is that there are methods, practices, statutes, and authorities as recognized by the entire court in this terrible decision, and also as recognized by Congress, which they refer to, that are even stronger than the IEEPA tariffs available to me as President of the United States. And in actuality, I was very modest in my ask of other countries and businesses because I wanted to do, and it's very important, I wanted to be very well behaved because I wanted to do anything, I didn't want to do anything that would affect the decision of the court, because I understand the court. I understand how they are very easily swayed. I want to be a good boy. I have very effectively utilized tariffs over the past year to make America great again. Our stock market has just recently broken 50,000 on the Dow, and simultaneously, and even more amazingly, broken 7,000 on the S&P, two numbers that everybody thought upon our landslide election victory could not be attained. Think of that. Nobody thought it was possible to do it within 4 years, and we did it in 1 year. They said, you'll never be able, you'll go back and you read the geniuses, read their statements, all of the Nobel Prize winners in economics. They said, no, you couldn't do it in 4 years. Well, we didn't do it in 4 years. We did it in 1 year. We broke every record in the book, and we're continuing to do so. Tariffs have likewise been used to end 5 of the 8 wars that I settled. I settled 8 wars, whether you like it or not, including India, Pakistan, big ones, nuclear, could have been nuclear. Prime Minister of Pakistan said yesterday at the great meeting that we had, the Peace Board, he said yesterday that President Trump could have saved 35 million lives by getting us to stop fighting. They were getting ready to do some bad things. But they've given us great national security, these tariffs have. and together with our strong borders, reduced fentanyl coming into our country by 30%. When I use them as a penalty against countries illegally sending this poison into our country to poison our youth, all of those tariffs remain. They all remain. I don't know if you know that or not. They all remain. We're still getting them, and we will after the decision. I guess there's nobody left to appeal to. But again, those three people, such respect. I've had a lot of respect for them anyway, but such great respect. But other alternatives will now be used to replace the ones that the court incorrectly rejected. We have alternatives, great alternatives. Could be more money. We'll take in more money, and we'll be a lot stronger for it. We're taking in hundreds of billions of dollars. We'll continue to do so. To show you how ridiculous the opinion is, however, the court said that I'm not allowed to charge even $1. I can't charge $1. Can't charge $1. I would have used 1 penny, but we don't make the pennies anymore. We save money. Can't charge $1 to any country under IEPA. Not $1. I assume to protect other countries. This must have been done to protect those other countries, certainly not the United States of America, which they should be interested in protecting. That's what they're supposed to be protecting. But I am allowed to cut off any and all trade or business with that same country. In other words, I can destroy the trade. I can destroy the country. I'm even allowed to impose a foreign country destroying embargo. I can embargo. I can do anything I want, but I can't charge $1. Because that's not what it says. And that's not the way it even reads. I can do anything I want to do to them, but I can't charge any money. So I'm allowed to destroy the country, but I can't charge them a little fee. I could give them a little two-cent fee, but I cannot charge under any circumstances. I cannot charge them anything. Think of that. How ridiculous is that? I'm allowed to embargo them. I'm allowed to tell them you can't do business in the United States anymore. We want you out of here. But if I want to charge them $10, I can't do that. It's incorrect. Their decision's incorrect. But it doesn't matter because we have very powerful alternatives that have been approved by this decision. You know, they've been approved by the decision for those that thought they had us. And they're saying that I have the absolute right to license, but not the right to charge a license fee. So think of that. I have the right to license, which is a very powerful word. In many ways, license is more powerful than tariffs. In fact, I was thinking about using it. But they came up with the idea that I can license, just like the people that were opposing me told them to do, but not the right to charge a license fee. Think of that. Who ever heard of such a thing? What license has ever been issued without the right to charge a fee? You get a license, you charge a fee. It's automatic, but not with this court. But now the court has given me the unquestioned right to ban all sorts of things from coming into our country, to destroy foreign countries, but a much more powerful right than many people ever thought we even had, but not the right to charge a fee. How crazy is that? Our country is the hottest country anywhere in the world right now. And it was a dead country 1.5 years ago under an incompetent president. But now I'm going to go in a different direction, probably the direction that I should have gone the first time, but I read the language. I'm very good at reading language, and it read our way 100%, but now I'll go the way I could have gone originally, which is even stronger than our original choice. As Justice Kavanaugh, whose stock has gone so up, you have to see, I'm so proud of him, wrote in his dissent, although I firmly disagree with the court's holding today, the decision might not substantially constrain a president's ability to order tariffs going forward. So, think of that. The decision might not substantially constrain. And it doesn't, he's right. In fact, I can charge much more than I was charging. So I'm going to just start. Although I firmly disagree with the court's holding today, the decision might not substantially constrain a president's ability to order tariffs going forward. That's because numerous other federal statutes, which is so true, authorize the president to impose tariffs and might justify most, if not all, of the tariffs issued in this case. Even more tariffs, actually. Those statutes include, think of that, those statutes include, for example, the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, Section 232. All of these things I know so well. The Trade Act of 1974, Sections 122, 201, 301. And the Tariff Act of 1930, Section 338, all clear. But it's a little bit longer process. I thought I'd make things simple, but they didn't let us do that. I would like to thank Justice Kavanaugh for frankly, his genius and his great ability. Very proud of that appointment. In actuality, while I am sure that they did not mean to do so, the Supreme Court's decision today made a president's ability to both regulate trade and impose tariffs more powerful and more crystal clear rather than less. I don't think they meant that. I'm sure they didn't.
NASDAQ, etc., and also US dollar becoming stronger. How could this financial response influence Trump's narrative around trade policy and economic stewardship? Do you think he is keeping in mind that this is the effect of this justice's, not justice, but this call by the Supreme Court?
No, absolutely, Yasuma. Thanks a lot for having me on the show. I think, just in terms of my opening remarks, what I would say is this entire ruling was quite unexpected, in my view, because there was, we were looking at a Supreme Court that's packed with justices who are Trump leaning or have been appointed in Trump's tenure. So it was expected that, there might have been a sort of movement towards actually being sympathetic towards these tariffs and actually not finding them illegal. And that's what we see with the opposition opinion, that the justices who actually came in, particularly Neil Gorsuch, who was appointed during the Trump era, was the one who actually penned the dissent note. But it is interesting to find that, the legality of the tariffs has now been actually rightly found to be incorrect. And that leads us to a situation where we see the markets reacting positively because the markets possibly feel that the president would now be limited in how he can apply economic warfare as a weapon as a whole, not only around tariffs, but around other instruments as well. However, if you look at the president's reaction, I think the market reaction will be short-lived. We might start to see the markets actually again, be more volatile over the next 1 or 2 weeks because the president's reaction has not been one of acceptance. The president's reaction has not been graceful, but rather the president's reaction has been combative and expectedly so, as we've seen how he does react in situations which don't go his way. The basic impact on international trade is going to be one of a huge amount of volatility once again because a lot of countries who've negotiated trade agreements, including India, which is actually mentioned thrice in the order, all the countries will start to think, but why did we agree to these terms? If he's not allowed to place tariffs on our countries, then why should we even honor the commitments which have been made under these trade deals? So I think it not only calls into question, and it's not only about the refunds of the amounts of tariff that have been collected so far, but also about the future of the trade deals that have been negotiated.
Yes, we will be behind that. Thank you very much for both our guests for sharing that insight with us. Please stay with us as we will stay on this. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has launched a blistering personal attack on the Supreme Court justices who struck down his global tariffs, including 2 of his own appointees, Amy Coney and Barrett and Neil Gorsuch. He has called the ruling terrible, labeled the justices disloyal and unpatriotic, and alleged foreign influence weighed the decision. Chief Justice John Roberts, Barrett, and Gorsuch joined the 3 liberal justices in the 6-3 ruling. Meanwhile, Trump has praised the conservative justices who supported him, particularly Brett Kavanaugh, calling him a genius. Vice President J.D. Vance also condemned the decision as lawlessness from the court. Now we welcome back Mr. Matthew Vadam for this. Thank you, Mr. Vadam, for staying with us.
Sure.
Now, what are the broader political consequences of these remarks by President Trump, and also by the decision in terms of the balance of power between White House and Congress now?
Well, this is a huge blow to President Trump, a huge loss of prestige, and tariffs were the centerpiece of his economic policy, and for them to be struck down by the Supreme Court is a huge deal, or as he would say, a huge deal. It's hard to calculate how much damage it's going to do to his political capital, to his strength as a politician. There are already calls. Somebody was already mocking him. The Democratic governor of California, Gavin Newsom, was already mocking him, saying, we want our consumers want their refunds for these illegal tariffs that you levied on them. So it's going to be a political issue for a while, and Trump is going to levy new tariffs, but under federal laws where he has less freedom. The statute that he used, that the Supreme Court said he couldn't use, IEPA, made it fairly easy for the president to impose tariffs. But the other statutes that he's now going to be using they're more labor intensive. You have to do more in order to impose the tariffs. So, is this going to affect President Trump long term in terms of his effectiveness as a leader? It may, because a lot of lawmakers are going to view him as a weak leader, because he lost a major battle in a forum where he's supposed to win. Republicans have appointed 6 out of the 9 sitting justices of the Supreme Court. So a lot of people assumed that the Supreme Court was going to hand him a victory, but it did not. And this is going to be harmful to President Trump. It's hard to say how harmful it's going to be, though, over the long term.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vadam, for sharing that. I would like to also welcome back Ms. Nikore for this. Now, with more than $175 billion collected under the now invalidated tariffs, what economic and political fallout could arise if refunds are required, especially for, in relations with major trading partners globally?
There's going to be major pandemonium and chaos around the refunds, because the amounts are not less. For individual traders, individual trading companies based in the US, they have also paid a share of the tariffs. There are exporters who've paid a share of the tariffs. And all of these are definitely going to go into litigation, and the first cases of these are going to be the most critical, because it's not only the US government which has to issue refunds. The US government is the ultimate recipient of the tariff proceeds, but in the interim, there are also private companies that have taken tariffs from exporters and have taken extra amounts from exporters. So imagine an exporter sitting in a global south country like India or Bangladesh. How do they litigate against the export traders and agencies who have charged them extra because of the tariffs, so that they can pay tariffs in the US? I mean, this entire chain is going to be a legal nightmare. And I do think that this will overall, create a lot of chaos and loss of trust amongst business to business, relationships. Because if I'm an exporter and I find that the person I've been doing trade with for say 10 years overcharged me on tariffs, that shakes the core of my entire trading relationship. So I think this is going to send shockwaves down the industry level as well. If the industry is not quick to make these refunds, even as they wait for the government to actually issue proceeds. So I do think that this is a matter of great chaos and mayhem is going to be upon us.
Yes, we will be eyeing that. Thank you for highlighting that to both our guests. Please stay with us as we stay on this. Now, staying on this, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer has announced that his office would initiate several new investigations under Section 301, covering most major trading partners. These investigations will address issues such as pharmaceutical pricing, forced labor, and unfair practices against U.S. tech companies. The move follows the Supreme Court's decision to strike down Trump's global tariffs, but Greer has reassured that all trade agreements negotiated by President Trump would remain in effect. The investigations will have an accelerated timeline, and tariffs could be imposed if unfair practices are found. Now we welcome back our guests. First, I would like to go back to Mr. Matthew Vadum for this. Thank you very much, Mr. Vadum, for staying with us. Now, as we see that USTR is expecting the newest investigation under Section 301, can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Well, the USTR, as you called it, the United States Trade Representative's Office, conducts investigations into unfair, trade practices, practices like, dumping or collusion as to price, and other unfair trade practices. And I guess the USTR has said that they want to ramp up. They want to ramp up pressure on trading partners to make sure that they're playing fair, as it were. And this is the kind of thing that I would expect for the Trump administration after it suffered a fairly humiliating defeat at the Supreme Court earlier today, when its reciprocal tariffs were struck down as illegal. So these sorts of investigations happen all the time, but it may be that the Trump administration wants to make a show of it and wants to ramp up these investigations, to score political points. That would be my guess.
Thank you for sharing that. I would like to also welcome back Ms. Nikore. Thank you very much, Ms. Nikore, for staying with us. Would you like to add something or share more building on my question and Mr. Vadum's answer?
No, absolutely. I think, the way we are sort of seeing these events unfold, and the fact that the US Supreme Court has issued no clarification on the refunds is definitely concerning. I think that's my first point of concern. My second point of concern is really around the way the deals are being mentioned, and also the new custom duties that President Trump has announced today. Now he's invoked another law, and which was also a 1974 law, in order to actually introduce a 10% custom duty. Now people are sort of saying, and the clarifications that have sort of come till now, and I'm sure a lot of people are still confused about how this is going to play out, is that those custom duties are in addition to the illegal tariffs. But if those tariffs were illegal, then when are they actually going to stop? We still need the US government to issue directives to export agents and importing agencies to say you no longer need to charge tariffs. But this has actually not been done. And we're still seeing that the custom duties have also been imposed. Are these custom duties also going to be levied on countries that have secured trade deals with the US? Again, the president's announcement seems to make it sound that it does, that they will, and all countries will be subject to these 10% custom duties. But again, we don't have an official clarification from the US government. And also, what is the role of Congress in all of this? I mean, Congress is supposed to, after 150 days, say that these 10% custom duties are legally valid or not, and they should also be weighing in on this ruling, which is coming from the Supreme Court. But we've seen that the congressional representatives have been woefully silent. So I do think that in this situation, the entire world is looking at the entire US system and is saying, you know what, maybe we are better off making trade deals with each other. And I think in this context, India's performance on its several trade deals, nearly 36 trade deals with other countries besides the US that have come through in the last 3 to 4 months, definitely stands out, as does, the performance of countries within the SCO like China and Russia, who have also secured several trade deals. And Europe, of course, which is the center of several trade deals with India, with the Latin American countries, with the UK. So I think the rest of the world is sort of saying, we don't want this confusion. We're happy to trade with each other.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for highlighting that. We will be eyeing that. With that, I would like to thank both our guests, Ms. Nikore and Mr. Vadam, for joining us and sharing that insight throughout. Thank you. Now we move on to our next news. US President Donald Trump is set to travel to China from March 31st to April 2nd for high-stakes talks with President Xi Jinping. This visit comes right after the US Supreme Court struck down many of Trump's China-focused tariffs, raising fresh questions about the future of US-China trade relations. The talks are expected to focus on extending the trade truce that has kept both countries from hiking tariffs further. Taiwan is also likely to feature in the discussions following recent U.S. arms sales to the island and Beijing's objections. Trump last visited China in 2017, but this trip marks his second in-person meeting with Xi Jinping since their October talks in South Korea. Now we move on. The U.S. military has said that it has struck a vessel in the Eastern Pacific, killing 3 men. The U.S. Southern Command says that on February 20th, at the direction of U.S. Southern Command Commander General Francis L. Donovan, Joint Task Force in Southern Sphere has conducted a lethal kinetic strike on a vessel operated by designated terrorist organizations. According to reports, at least 138 people have now been killed in strikes on suspected drug boats as part of Operation Southern Sphere. President Donald Trump's administration has said that the campaign is aimed at curtailing narco trafficking. Now we welcome Mr. Adrian Calamel. He's a terrorism scholar, joins us live from New York. Thank you very much, Mr. Calamel, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now looking at this,
good to see you.
Thank you very much. Now looking at this, these reports have come in saying that President Trump's administration said that the campaign is curtailing narco trafficking, but of course this is not. We haven't been. It's not been publicized which narco trafficking organizations were hit in these many attacks on these. Can you share a little bit more about this?
Yeah, those are really good questions, and good morning to all your viewers. It's so with these strikes. I mean, the problem is, as you laid out, is that it's a lot of fog of war. We don't know. At least, maybe we'll find out in after action reports who these groups and what groups they're affiliated with. But the drug trade is a very dark and shady world. What I can say is just the movement of drugs. What they're trying to do, I think, is focus on the supply in Venezuela and make sure it doesn't come up through Central America and into Mexico. Because if we look at the narco terrorists in Venezuela realistically, the vice is being put on them. We saw Trump when he first came in, he was talking about putting Mexican cartels on the FTO list. I think he may have put a few on, and actually it looked dangerous that there could be a possible engagement, and that's much different than the situation in Venezuela, where Venezuela is not right on our border. So drug traffickers are going to try and find the way to, in this case, it's cocaine, try to get it up to the Americas, and it's different. Is land, air, and sea the most effective routes for right now that they've been targeting? That we see are the sea routes. But as far as who they're connected with, they could be connected with. That's the murkiness, both with the Mexican government, and I'll say that about the Mexican government as well as the Venezuelan government. Is a lot of times you have politicians that are linked, intertwined with the cartels, including the military.
And how is this operation, that's ongoing? It has killed, I think, more than 130 people so far, as long as we have been told. So how is this Operation Southern Spear blurring the line between counterterrorism and drug enforcement policy in international waters?
Yeah, well, that's another great question. If you look at these groups that are operating in Venezuela that have a monopoly on the drug trade, that have monopoly on the drug trade in certain parts of Mexico or wherever it may be. We also have to look at these drug gangs, and in this case, parts of the government, the Venezuelan government, we're working directly with Hezbollah. We're working directly with the IRGC. So it starts to fall, and they use terrorist tactics. So they fall into this narco-terrorism bucket that we like to call it. These organizations. So it does blur the line a little, but people will look at Hezbollah, a group that's embedded in Latin America, that's embedded in Venezuela, that's a big part of the problem with the drug trade, and they'll think, well, that doesn't sound like them. They're very religious or zealots, and they wouldn't be involved in that. That couldn't be farther from the truth. They're very actively involved, and so what I always say is you got to always look at them as equal part zealots and equal part criminals, or equal, with terrorists. They'll carry out these activities to terrorize the population and also to make a profit on the side.
Right. And this is just a very speculative question here, but in case we've seen with Congress, Congress has said that these tariffs were illegitimate, right, or illegal. So what happens if Congress makes a statement like this or judgment like this about these attacks as well? Because there's so many things that have not been proven about these people on board at these boats.
Yeah, what would have to happen is that there would have to be proof, evidence. Somebody from Congress would want to call for hearings on these strikes. Now, as far as war powers go with presidents, this isn't a war, and actually it kind of came off rather smoothly with the taking of Maduro and Delcy Rodriguez remaining in place. So you're not talking about, a massive armada that we're seeing in places like the Middle East right now with the Islamic Republic of Iran. So it's Trump does have the executive power, and he is the commander in chief, and this is not a war. So I think Congress is going to have a hard time trying to get in the way of this unless there starts to be accurate reporting saying, no, they're not hitting drug targets. These are actually just guys out on a fishing boat, which I doubt. But, as soon as the first case comes up of that, if one or two of those comes up, you can be sure there'll be groups that will be calling for, and individuals, and rightly so, they should be calling for, an investigation to say, not is the practice wrong, but are we targeting the right individuals? How are we going about this? What are the rules of engagement here? How are we going about identifying these targets to make sure that this never ever happens again if we are hitting people that are actually innocent of some crime? But to be honest, we have to remember these drug gangs, narco terrorists, they're cutthroats. And it could be a coincidence. We'll have to look at U.S. pace and tempo, but it could be, not a coincidence, or actually, starting up some cooperation that we see coming out of the Donovan and Joseph Humar going down and meeting Delcy Rodriguez just the other day in that snap visit. He's the head of Southcom. So, we'll see. We'll see what goes. Trump's juggling many balls here in the air.
Indeed.
And all eyes are on, Iran, Middle East right now, and Venezuela is kind of off in the rear view window.
Yeah, indeed. But thank you very much for sharing that. Always great learning from you. Thank you very much. Now that's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.